Welcome back to All the Mods 10 Lite. I'm Bumstar, and last episode we got our AE2 storage system online. But today we're finally setting up Autocrafting. We'll automate some Powah components to start scaling our power, as well as just overall basic Autocrafting. So let's get right into it. I apologize if my voice sounds a little off today. I am feeling a bit under the weather, but I wanted to get this recorded. There's a few things that we're going to need to start off. We're going to need some pattern providers, some molecular assemblers, and then we're going to need crafting co-processing units and 1K crafting storage or higher. This is just the crafting unit with whatever storage component you can start making. We're going to start small and scale that up as we go. So the pattern provider is the most important thing. This is what you're going to be making a ton of and adding to machines to start autocrafting anything. And all that requires is 2 crafting tables, 4 pieces of iron, and a formation core and an annihilation core. So let's make this. And then to actually do any basic crafts, we need the molecular assembler. And that's just some iron, another annihilation, and another formation, a crafting table, and then 2 quartz glass. And then in order for any of this to work, we need our crafting processing unit and our crafting storage. So we're just going to make 1 crafting co-processing unit. And then we're just going to make 3 of our 1Ks. So we have 3 of our crafting units. And we just need to make 3 of our 1K MEs. So I've ran a cable down here a while because this is just going to be a temporary setup. We will clean this up and use better cables later on, but this will work for now. So we're going to go ahead and put our co-crafting processing unit down. And then we're just going to go ahead and place these all around it. They need to be connected in either a square or a straight line. It just has to be even in terms of how it's placed. And it'll light up like this if it's working correctly. If it's not lit up like this, then you did something wrong. But this is essentially the brains. This is going to allow us to run multiple crafts at a time. And with this only being the 1K crafting storage, we're not going to be able to do too big of crafts, but it'll work for now until we get everything else set up. And then we're going to go ahead and place our pattern provider right here. And we'll place our molecular assembler right next to it. Now we could make multiple molecular assemblers and just surround our pattern provider with it so it can do multiple crafts. But for now, 1 will work. And then we're also going to need a ME pattern encoding terminal. And that's just going to be a crafting terminal with an engineering processor. So we'll just make that real quick. And while we're at it, we'll go ahead and make the pattern access terminal so we can just see all of our patterns in one place. And put some cables down here, and we'll put our access terminal here and our encoding there. So now what these do is this will give us, anytime we have a pattern provider down somewhere, it'll give us these slots here where we can put patterns in and see what's in there. If we come down here and we right click on the pattern provider, that's exactly what these slots are. So if we put something in here, it'll show up over there. And then for our encoding, this is where we create the patterns. So the very first pattern that you're going to want to make is going to be a blank pattern. So let's set that up. So first we need to make some blank patterns. So that way we can put these blank patterns in here to create patterns. So let's come over to our access terminal and let's place the blank pattern in here. And now if we come over here, you can see blank patterns here. It's empty because we don't have any, but there's a little plus sign. So you can click on it or middle mouse click and you can ask it to craft some. So if we hit next, it says we have everything available. But if we bring that up a bit, it's now saying, hey, we're missing 1 quartz glass in order to make 10 of these. So that means we'll have to start making some patterns for quartz glass. But in order to make a pattern for quartz glass, we need glass and we need Certus quartz dust. Well, we have the dust automated already, but we don't have glass automated. And to automate glass, we need to set up a pattern provider with a furnace. For now, we're putting a pattern provider up here, and once again, this setup is all temporary. This will all be cleaned up once we're able to start autocrafting a lot of things and we have the power to support it. But we have a pattern provider here right next to a furnace. And with this furnace, we want to configure it. And we want to set this to auto input and output on. And we want to clear this by shift left clicking. And then we want to set the back to input output. And now all we have to do is give it the upgrade so we can turn it into a factory. And then we just want to give this furnace some power. And we just have to create some patterns for this. So to start out, we do have 1,730 sand. So we can just set up this pattern and we're going to do the smelting. So we're just smelting sand in a furnace to turn it into glass. And with its current setup, it'll put one sand in and bring one glass out. You can also middle mouse click this and modify the amount. So you can put 64 and 64. So every time you request glass, it's automatically going to make 64 at a minimum. For now, we're going to set that to 1, but later on we may change that. Now if we take that pattern and we put it into this pattern provider that's connected to the furnace, and then we come over here and we say, hey, we want some glass. Go ahead and push 100, start. And you can see that this furnace now is automatically working. Let's turn that auto split on to speed it up. So if we look at our system, our glass is now going up. But that's basic auto crafting. And this system right here, how we have this working, is exactly how we do it with any other machine in the game. If it is any type of special machine that isn't just a basic crafting bench, this is the setup. We use a pattern provider right next to it. We make sure the input and output is sent to and from the pattern provider, and then we just make patterns based around it. There are a couple of machines though that can't input or output correctly, where you'll have to use another mod to do so. One of those mods is Powah, and that's exactly what we're going to set up next. And don't forget, before we get started in here, if you're like me and you completely forget the quest book exists half the time, you should have a good amount of things that you can pick up from the quest book. I mean, if we look here, we've got a bunch of random quests set up that we haven't picked from yet. You know, Applied Energistics, pretty much the whole line here. Modular routers, a bunch of different things. Mechanism, tons of stuff. And all of these give you rewards, which are going to be some pretty useful items that we wouldn't be getting otherwise unless we had to craft them ourselves. So instead of going through and clicking on each of these, go up to the top right corner here to this little bag icon and click collect all rewards. And when you do that, well, your inventory is going to fill up and you're going to have a ton of stuff around you, and it's going to complete more quests, but we have a system that we can just dump all this stuff into. And these are all items that we will 100% use. But now that all of our glass is done, let's take a look. So if we come into patterns and we hit 10, we are still missing that quartz glass. So we need to set up a pattern for quartz glass, and that is just glass and Certus quartz. So when you have it in the encoder and you mouse over the plus icon, it's going to highlight everything that you already have an automation for. So we already have glass automated. We already have Certus quartz being automated over here, so we know we have those. So we can just come to the encoder, hit Certus quartz glass, and add that. And one thing you want to keep in mind is that right here you can clear, but right here is substitutes. And this is substitutes to disable and enable them. And this is to fluid substitute. So generally speaking, I always leave fluid substitute on unless the pattern stops working. But if you ever run into an issue where your pattern isn't working as you intended it to, try bringing the pattern back into the encoder and turning substitutes off and then encode that pattern. Because for example, with quartz glass, if we turned substitutes on and we had some quartz glass sitting inside of our system, this is labeled as glass just like regular glasses. So what it will start doing is trying to loop itself, and it's going to try and use quartz glass to make quartz glass, where we don't want that. We want it to only use regular glass to make quartz glass. So we have substitutes disabled. And we can come right over here, make sure we put it in our molecular assembler. And now if we try and make patterns, it's going to tell us that we have every item needed. So just go ahead and push start, and you can click up here to see the pattern running. And we now have 10 blank patterns. So now what we can do is start setting up a ton of patterns for our pattern providers, for our assemblers, for our crafting units, and everything else to start scaling this up a ton. So with doing that, we're also going to set up cables, and I'll be back in a minute because I'm going to set this up, run it, and do it all. It's just the same thing we've been doing right here. So what I'm going to do now is I've made 8 molecular assemblers and 8 pattern providers, and we're going to make a little tower here. This is a design that I've gotten from a chosen architect, and I've found that I really enjoy how it works. I think it works very well, and no reason to change something that works, right? So we just place pattern providers in a square 2 by 2, and then you put molecular assemblers to make a square like this, and you just keep rotating the pattern, and you do this until it is 4 high, so you have 8 of each. And now you have these pattern providers here that are touching multiple molecular assemblers. So they'll be able to push those crafts out to different ones. So you can have just a ton of different things running all at once. And we'll go ahead and connect that with our cable. And I've gone ahead and made some smart cables here. So now you can see when you mouse over it, it says it's using 8 of 8 channels. Because the molecular assemblers don't use a channel, but the pattern providers do. So 8 pattern providers equals 8 channels going up this cable. And then I have it running to a dense cable here, which can hold 32 channels. While we moved our crafting storage and processing unit up top here, and have that connected just with a basic glass cable, which works the same as these. You just can't see the channels of it, but connected to the dense cable here as well, running to the side. And I do have 3 controllers set up right now, which is a bit more than what we need, but I figured I'd start making some and putting them down. But now that we have all that, if we come over to our access table, we have a ton more rooms for patterns. So we can just start putting all of this in here. But now that we have that set up, we can start working on Powah. And the first machine that we're going to need is the energizing orb, which means we're going to need to do dielectric rods, dielectric casings, and all of the little items in between. If we open up Powah here, you can see there are a ton of different items. A lot of these are just different things that you can use, like players transmitters and reactors, thermogenerators, furnators. All of these things generate power. But then up here are kind of all the different patterns that we're going to need. We're going to need capacitors. We're going to need patterns for all the different crystals, dielectric casing, dielectric paste, player area pearls. There's a lot of different things that we're gonna have to set up. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And the first one is going to be these dielectric rods, which are going to require dielectric paste. And that is going to use clay, some blaze powder, and some charcoal, or buckets of lava. We'll just use the blaze powder though, because we have blaze rods set up. And the one thing you want to keep in mind is you're going to have to make sure that as you're setting up these patterns, you are setting up all the in-betweens. So like we have the dielectric paste set up already, but we don't have iron bars. So we're going to need to set iron bars up. And then we can move on to the rods. So now we should be able to make the energizing orb, and we're not going to set up a pattern for this because we only need 1 or 2 of them. But if we come over here, you can see even with our basic crafting here, if we go to craft it, it highlights blue saying, hey, these items, you don't have them already, but you do have them craftable. So what you can do then is hold control and click on this, and it'll bring up the autocraft to craft everything you need. And since we only have 1 crafting storage, we have to wait till the other one's done for us to start that. But the more crafting storage and co-processing CPUs that you have, the easier that'll be. So now we can come back to the energizing orb, hit the plus button, and we can craft that. Something else we're going to need are energizing rods. For those, we're going to have to set up the capacitors. And then we are going to set up the pattern for the rods because there are a ton of different tiers of rods that we can set up, and having to manually craft these is kind of a pain. So if we go to basic, we can see here it's going to use a block of quartz, dielectric casing, capacitor, and then it's going to use the starter rod. So if we hit that and we make sure that substitutes are enabled for this, because then we can put the old ones into the system and it'll use it in this craft. Otherwise, it's just going to keep trying to craft new ones, and then we'll just have a ton of rods sitting in our system. And then to move on to the hardened one, we're going to need the hardened capacitors, but unfortunately we do not have energizing steel set up yet, so we have to use the basic rods. So let's go ahead and set up 4 basic rods and start crafting. So for now, we're going to set this up over here because once again, it's just kind of how it's going to work. But we're going to put the pattern provider here and the energizing orb directly on top. And then we need to connect that with some cables, and we'll just run those over. And now for normal machines, this would be enough. This would be able to send in the items from the pattern to here and then pull it out. But the energizing orb has an issue with limiting, and it has an issue with output. So what we can do is set this pattern provider and turn this to blocking mode. So it's only going to send 1 craft in at a time. So we won't overflow this with materials. And then we need a way to pull these items out, which we're going to use a modular router. And then we have our sender and our puller modules. And we can take this to pool and set this up with Powah. to all the different crystals. So this is going to set it up so it pulls energizing steel. And we also want it to pull blazing crystal, niotic crystal, spirited, and nitro. And there's a few other things that we could set up as well, but for now, this will do the job. You want to make sure to set this to a whitelist and just open it up a second time to make sure that those don't go away, because sometimes it bugs. But then we can go ahead and put that polar module inside of our modular router. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with the sender module. Put all of those items in here and set that to a whitelist as well. Open it up again, make sure it's good, and we put that inside of our modular router, as well as 9 speed upgrades to speed that process up. You can always right click on the energizing orb to see everything that it can make and how it's made. So like we could use this to make charged Certus quartz. You could use it for charged redstone, making uranite, a ton of different options. Ender cores are one that we're going to want to add to our whitelist, as well as some uranium blocks to blocks of uranite. So we can come over here and just push C to configure, and we can add those other items into this if we want to, just to make sure that if we start crafting them, they don't get stuck. So now all we have to do is set up the patterns to put into that pattern provider. So let's start with energizing steel. That is just 1 iron and 1 gold. Blazing crystals, either 1 blaze rod or for blazing powder. We'll do the 1 blaze rod, 1 diamond, 1 emerald. And then for nitro, it is another star, 2 blocks of redstone, and a block of blazing crystal. So we're not going to start this one up yet because we don't even have nether stars set up, and we have nowhere near enough, as well as nowhere near enough power to make these. Even the energizing steel right now is 10,000 FE, which is going to eat through our power, while the blazing crystal is 120,000 FE, which is also going to eat our power. We're just kind of setting up these patterns to have them for the future. So now that means we can go ahead and start making things like energizing steel and blazing crystals. So if we hit this and we hit 10, push next, this should work. You can see it coming over here, and it's pushing those items into the energizing orb, but they're not converting to anything, and that's because we need to give it some power. So we're setting it up like this with our flux point to our advanced universal cables, and then we just put the rods down here. And as you can see, our energizing steel is sitting there, but we did not set this up correctly. Our sender and puller, we did set the whitelist, but we never actually told them where they're going to go. So our puller is going to pull from the energizing orb, and then our sender module is going to send to our pattern provider. And as you can see, it is actually not doing what it's supposed to. Oh, it is. Oh, the pattern provider is sending it into the modular router. So we just need to move the modular router over. Easy enough. That's my mistake. Place that down here. Oh, let's go ahead. Yep, there we go. That works perfectly. Just a little misconfiguration there. So that's going to be it for today's episode. We've got the basics of autocrafting set up, which means that next episode we can start working on Powah because, well, we have the absolute basics of that set up for autocrafting. And that's kind of the hardest part of Powah, is setting up all the patterns and waiting until you get to autocrafting to do it, because doing it manually takes forever. We've set up our pattern provider tower, and between episodes, I will probably set up another 3 of those. And we have our furnace set up here as well to be autocrafted. And also between episodes, I will upgrade that and probably set up a pattern provider for a crusher as well, because using a crusher for a lot of different materials is used in a lot of patterns, which means next episode is going to be all about setting up power to get higher power generation, which means we can expand this AE2 system even further and start moving on to some other mods. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Later.